Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and again, another week full of highs and lows. The highs come from a trip my wife took to BravoCon. What's that? Well, it's the reality TV convention of the Bravo celebrities that happened to be last week in Vegas. Not your thing? Well, it's not mine either. But my wife Ange was super lucky to score tickets for her and a friend, and when I say lucky, this was on par with getting one of the Taylor Swift tickets at face value. It was a really hard ticket to get. So it was one of those once-in-a-lifetime expensive trips that required flying to Vegas, a new wardrobe, and a lot of beaded bracelet making. Ange was so psyched for this trip and ready to do all the Bravo things in Vegas, and I was so psyched for her. And this is where the lows come in. So Ange is driving to the airport, I'm in shotgun, and her friend is in the back seat. It was raining out, and that's all I'm going to say about conditions or driving, because I don't need this intro to come back and bite me in the ass. But on the way to the airport, Ange ended up totaling what we refer to as our good car. What sucks is that I really tweaked my back, and I'm feeling some nervy pain in it, which I didn't realize at first. But everyone else was all right, which was the most important thing. And I was as cool as I could be. I didn't want to ruin any part of this trip, so I was like, get an Uber and I'll handle the rest. Well, 10 minutes after Ange left, I realized she had the car keys with her en route to the airport. Shit. So I was stuck in the rain for an hour until the nice Uber guy came back and brought me the keys. I dealt with the insurance stuff, and now I'm playing the waiting game. The crazy thing about all of this is I was already playing the waiting game on insurance, but a different kind of insurance. With all that Ange has been going through, I wanted to make sure my bases were covered with life insurance. And I'm right at the finish line for getting life insurance, and then Ange almost kills me a week before I get it. And I know, this wasn't intentional, it was scary, and I'm still here. So that was this week's mix of highs and lows. When all's said and done, Ange had a great trip that at the end of the day will end up costing about $15,000 by the time we get our insurance money and get a new vehicle. Man, life is getting expensive this year. New roof, new furnace, new fridge, new car, cancer, all unexpected. I mean, life can really come at you sometimes, and I'm glad we prepared for a lot of this, so it's not as stressful as it could be. And I should also say, thank you for listening to me vent. While I have a great circle of friends, I choose to air my dirty laundry here, and it feels good sometimes. But what feels better is when I get an absolute legend on the podcast. And this week I have one in Kitt. He's a 4-time Olympian who should have 4 World Cup victories had he not been screwed over by fists more than anyone before or after him. It's unfortunate, but AJ's career still speaks for itself. And before we get into it, a lot of you have been asking where you can get Powell Movement stickers. Well, if you email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, I will let you know how you can get stickers, and I hope that you put those stickers all over the towns that you live in. I exclusively work with die-cut stickers because they make the best stickers out there, and when you put one up, it's not coming down. So when you plaster them all over your town, people are going to know about the Powell Movement, and it's going to help the show grow. What else helps the show grow is you telling a friend about it. Podcasts are hard to find, and I have the most well-researched podcast in snow, and my guest list is second to none. So I know if you like the show, your snow-loving friends are going to like it too, so please tell them. Finally, I want to ask you to support my incredible sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Now, it's time to chat with AJ Kitt. So I was going to start this whole interview out by asking you how scary it was when you heard you were having triplets. Like, that's so crazy to me. But then I saw fists destroying a glacier in Zermatt so they can make money off an early season race. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on early season racing, I'll break it down into 2 components there. So I don't really think that we should be racing this early, and I don't really have to be right about this, but that's just my opinion. I think that we don't necessarily need to be pushing athletes to ski in conditions that aren't really, really good. And I think a lot of athletes, especially speed, which is what this race is going to be in Zermatt, is, a lot of these athletes haven't really gotten enough high speed training and probably just aren't ready for it yet. I really liked Lake Louise as an opening race. I liked Val d'Isère as an opening race, which was what our opening race was when I was racing, which are, not the toughest races on the circuit, and they're nice ways to ease into the season. I just frankly think that racing in October in early November is too soon, even for Tech, frankly. I'd rather see us go later in the season when the conditions are better, when the athletes are more fit and more ready to be racing. The other side of that argument, frankly, is that maybe racing that late's too long, right? Burnout, spring fever, all that. And obviously when the weather starts to clear up, from the marketing perspective, I guess it's a decent argument, that the fans aren't paying attention anymore in late March, early April. But I'd rather deal with that than deal with early season racing. So that's my feeling on racing early. As far as like the commentary of destroying a glacier to create a ski race, I don't know, man. I mean, 60 days from now, that glacier is going to be covered in snow anyway. So I don't know that filling in the cracks is destroying it. But then again, I'm no biologist. I don't really know that much about what's happening to the glacier with those machines up there. So I think for the most part, I'll abstain from getting too deep into that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's just bad optics on their part when we're talking about a sport that depends on snow to be able to keep moving forward. And it seems like there's no real concern for the environment when they are putting big machines up there. And given I'm no biologist either, or snow scientist, but it seems like doing that is just wrong. Protect Our Winters is so anti that. And, I kind of side with them, but I haven't looked into all the science. But this is the same fist that sprays courses with chemicals to make things faster. I'm sure that's not the most environmentally friendly thing either. I mean, it seems like they don't care about anything but their pockets. And by having this race early, is it something that's all about money?
Maybe, but I'm not going to get into fist bashing over, how they're preparing slopes. I don't know that much and don't really think that they're spraying the hills with chemicals anymore. I think there was a little bit of that a long time ago, but I'm not aware that there's a lot of chemicals being added to the slope. So I'm just not going to get into that discussion. I'm not educated enough on it, and it's just not what I want to talk about. Sorry.
Fair enough. So we will talk more about fists later because they screwed you time and time again and it had nothing to do with snow science or anything about that. But we're not going to talk about that in the beginning because we have to talk about your childhood. You grow up in Gates, New York to skier parents that take over a family business of publishing law books. You're an only child and it sounds like life's all about weekends on snow from a young age and going fast. And for you, you go fast from the get-go. First, it's on your dad's dirt bike. And while you won't remember that, what's the family story about AJ on the dirt bike?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family that, in the probably summer and fall, we did some dirt biking. My mom and dad had a group of friends that did a lot of trail riding on the weekends. And so I grew up in that. And we didn't have a mini bike. We didn't have a little kid's bike. So I rode on the tank of my mom and dad's dirt bikes, holding on, for dear life. And then when I got too big for the tank, I sat behind him and hung on for dear life. And then when I got big enough to ride it myself, I rode it myself. So yeah, I started on a big bike. And
was it true that you were always like faster from a young age where your parents were like, damn, this kid wants to go fast?
Oh, probably. But I don't think we can read into it that I was, any more of a speed demon than any other kid that was on a dirt bike with their parents, seemingly keeping them as safe as possible. And I mean, I felt pretty comfortable on the dirt bike when I was riding with my dad and my mom, as anybody would with their parent in control, right? But yeah, gosh, dirt biking's a ton of fun. And so I think as a little kid, I was always wanting to go faster and more.
And your folks were also ski instructors at Swain Mountain. And was it one of those deals where back then you can go ski with a pack of kids and kind of be on your own all day long? And your parents are pretty much like, meet us in the parking lot at the RV at like 10 and you could just do whatever you want, where kids don't experience that today?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's unfortunate that the way things have changed in today's world. But yeah, when I grew up, Swain was a really small little community. And for the most part, when we pulled into the village, my parents didn't really need to supervise. I don't think they felt like they needed to have eyes on me all the time like parents today do, and for good reason. And so, yeah, there was a pack of kids, 10, 15, 20 kids that were all amongst this little culture, this little community in Swain that would arrive on Friday night and spend the weekend there. And, your parents were either ski instructors or ski patrol or, in some other way. It was, the weekend gathering of families. And so, yeah, the kids, we just bombed around the mountain, 650 vertical feet. So you couldn't get in too much trouble, but we had a great time. It was a great way to grow up. And yeah, I mean, we all knew where to meet at 10 o'clock when the lift shut off, so we could go home and get rest and do it again the next day.
And you start racing at around 6, and I don't think you're the fastest for a long time. I think in that area, that title went to Dianne Roffe. And while gender shouldn't be an issue, was that frustrating getting your ass kicked by Dianne every week?
I don't think I really saw any gender in that. Diane was a year older, so it was part of her being faster was being a little bit older than me. But no, I don't think that it was frustrating, but I did recognize that a girl was beating everybody, boys and girls. And so we knew Diane was a special talent, even when we were young kids. So yeah, I definitely don't feel like it was frustrating at all. I looked up to her a lot, and she was somebody that was clearly a better skier than the rest of us, not just faster, but better, more capable, definitely more confident. So it was great to grow up near her. And then actually, as I advanced, into skiing outside our little area of Western New York and into the state of New York and in the whole Eastern region, I looked up to Diane and I leaned on her as sort of a friend and mentor and somebody who I knew would support me as a new ski racer adventuring out into these new experiences, racing regionally and things like that. And so she was an awesome friend to have for me as a young guy growing up. And then when we got to be on the national team together, it was really just a repeat of what I experienced as a junior. She was already really well established, existing world champion and World Cup winner. So when I came onto the team, it was great to be able to lean on her as a friend for advice and giving some direction and guidance.
So while there's not frustration in losing to her, I'm sure you start having wins against kids your age. And while you've always been looked at as like the nice, wholesome ski racer, it also sounds like you're really, really competitive. Does that start at a young age?
Yeah. I won't say that I didn't experience frustration as a young ski racer, but it wasn't with being beat by Diane. On the other hand, I experienced frustration not performing up to my own expectations. I for sure was not fast as a young guy. I was second page of the results, which is down there a long ways. And I can remember very often standing at the bottom of the hill looking at the results board at the end of the race, just going, why aren't I faster? Why aren't I faster? And, watching, kid after kid come down and beat me. And that was frustrating for sure. It helped establish my commitment, my dedication, my desire to be faster. And it fueled a lot of the fire for me to work harder and to stick with it. And it developed a lot of persistence for me, which really helped me get through very difficult times of learning to be a better skier. But yeah, by the time I was, 18 or 19 years old, I think I had matured through a lot of that and got to the point where I had figured out how to be fast.
And before all that, before you're 18 years old, is it just skiing or do you have other sports that you play and excel at when you're a kid?
I played soccer in high school, and that was about the only thing I did competitively. I grew up in a family of golfers as well. My mom and dad were big golfers, and I golfed. But, for me, golf was a frustrating thing because I didn't have the patience to go and practice and pay attention to the nuances of the game. So I went out and played and expected to be good, and I wasn't. So that was frustrating. But I was pretty competitive in soccer. I played in junior high, played in high school. Played when I was at GMVS, when I was in school there, we played on a state level. So, I felt like I was a competitive minded athlete as a young person, probably more so in ski racing than anything else because I put more energy and more effort and more effort into it that developed more expectations. So, yeah, I think I was definitely more competitive in skiing than anything else.
Okay, and by the time you hit about 13 years old, skiing, I guess, gets more serious because you head off to Mountain House in Lake Placid for a couple years. And being that you're an only child, was that a hard sell, like to convince your parents to let their only kid move away? And was that tough on you?
You bet it was. There were some kids I grew up with at Swain that were older than me that went away to ski academy, Stratton Mountain School, also Mountain House as well. And so I looked at them and I said, okay, that's the path. That's what I've got to do. If I want to advance beyond ski racing in Western New York, I got to go to ski academy. So that was kind of the model that I was paying attention to. And so I was beginning to talk to my folks about, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. At first they were like, no, you're going to stay at home and you're going to stick around here and you're going to race at Swain. But then they started to realize that if I wanted to be able to chase my dreams, I had to go away. And so, yeah, it was a hard sell. And I had a conversation with my folks, and my dad really drove the conversation of, listen, if we're going to let you go, if we're going to pay for you to go, we need a commitment from you that you're going to commit to this and dedicate yourself to it. You're going to fight through the tough times. You're going to work hard, and you're not going to take it for granted. You're not going to take this as some kind of a vacation or fun experience. It's going to be something that we need to see that you're going to take it to the next level, and you're going to treat it as something very serious. So that was an interesting conversation to have as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
And I took it to heart. And I think it was a big part of what helped me evolve into a different type of ski racer at 13 or 14 years old when I went to Mountain House. Yeah, I mean, it was something that was an evolutionary conversation.
I mean, it sounds like from all the things I hear and read and talk to people that you have this legendary work ethic, whether it's in the gym or on the hill. And does that happen like with that conversation with your dad at 13 when they're like, hey, son, you can go to this school, but you're going to have to work your ass off and there is going to be no quitting? And is that kind of where you're like, hey, they're going to believe in me. I've got to believe in myself and do exactly what it takes and then a whole lot more to take it to that next level?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of it. I mean, the conversation sort of flipped a light on for me. But then when I got to Mountain House and I was suddenly with a bunch of other similarly minded athletes dedicated to being the best that they could be, to the extent of, okay, we're going to go to the gym and we're going to lift weights. Okay, we're going to go to the track and we're going to run sprints. Okay, we're going to go climb the mountain and we're going to do all these other things that I've never done before that are going to help become better athletes and help advance us towards the goals that we're setting, right? And so that was the next step. You know, after the conversation, then I go and I'm like around all these other great young athletes who are dedicated and driven and are very competitive. And so I was in a different environment suddenly, a different culture that was very much more competitive and more driven and more dedicated and focused on goals and goal setting and pursuing goals. So yeah, it was a great way to discover what it's going to take to become a better ski racer at the level of junior ski racing, 14 years old, right? And then, you know, the next step is, you know, a couple years older. And then beyond that, it's like, okay, national team, Olympics, World Cup, right? So it's all these little evolutionary steps along the way.
And when you get to Mountain House, are you a big kid for your age and are you almost like an awkward big kid who has to figure out his size? And does it take a while to figure out how to use that size to your advantage?
I definitely wasn't a big kid, and I don't feel like I was awkward to the point of anything different than any other kid at 13 or 14 years old who's going through, you know, puberty and maturity and all this kind of stuff. And I don't really remember feeling like I was bigger or smaller than my peers. So I didn't have that experience where I know like there's some athletes that, you know, you see that are much smaller than their peers or much bigger than their peers. I feel like the group of kids that I was with at Mountain House and skiing at Whiteface in those early years, I feel like we were kind of all pretty similar in stature. So, you know, we had a good peer group, and I feel like I physically matured at a pretty normal rate. I don't think I was weighing in at anything greater than, you know, 165 pounds when I was a freshman in high school, and I probably gained 10 pounds a year to the point where when I graduated from high school, I was probably in the 190s,
Okay.
low 190s, which is probably an okay average weight for that age. I mean, I knew I needed to continue to gain weight and strength if I wanted to, you know, become competitive at a higher level.
And while it sounds like you were fast at Mountain House, do you learn how to bend a ski there really well and really learn the technical aspect of skiing? Or does that happen when you get to the Green Mountain Valley School?
Yeah. So remember, we're talking about 30 plus years ago with technology, equipment technology from those days. There's no bending skis, right?
Yeah.
Don't pretend that we carved skis in the 80s. Okay. That didn't happen. But, you know, learning to be a better technical skier, gosh, that's a long process. And so, yeah, it begins, I think, for me when I went to Whiteface and got into a lot more sort of higher level coaching and more focused coaching on technical and tactical aspects of the sport. And, you know, then as I got older and stronger and got onto longer skis and faster courses and more demanding and challenging courses, then those technical skills are challenged and pushed and developed. So it's a long process.
And when you think about the two schools, I mean, both elite level academies that pump out, I think Mountain House pumps out all kinds of athletes. Green Mountain Valley School, I think, is more focused on ski racing than anything, especially at that point. But what are the big differences between the two schools and their ski programs?
I think the first thing that I would say is that, you know, Mountain House was situated in New York State and drew its athletes primarily from like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Green Mountain Valley School, even though it was only a few hours away and one state border away, was more of a New England school, right? It was Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts. So it was a lot more competitive. And I think that without diving into the details of why it was more competitive, it just was. I mean, Vermont was a more competitive area for ski racing than New York was. And that was frankly one of the reasons that I left Lake Placid and went to Green Mountain Valley School. It was a more competitive environment, more competitive athletes. I was going from being a big fish in a small pond in New York to being a small fish in a big pond in Vermont. And that's the way I looked at it. I felt like I needed to go to Vermont to be around more competitive athletes and to challenge myself more and to raise my game more.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and for over 75 years, Elan Skis has been building world-class skis in the Slovenian Alps. It's real skiers building skis with the highest quality materials in the world. And I'm not just saying that. Elan is not only known for skis, they also build luxury yachts, so there's no cutting corners on anything. It's all about delivering the best on-mountain experience to skiers all over the world. And while Elan has been killing it in Europe for decades, over the past 10 years, they've been building a cult following here in the States, because it's hard not to love a playful ski that's rock solid underfoot, and a ski that makes you a better skier. Their award-winning Ripstick line has proven time and again to do this, and has a waist width for everyone. But that's not all Elan has to offer. Their brand new Playmaker series in waist widths of 101 and 91 have won all the awards, and they're the perfect tools for landing switch in the park or backcountry. So please do me and yourself a favor. The next time you demo a ski, try Elan and ski what I'm talking about. You can find out more about Elan over at elanskis.com. Next up is where I want you to buy your Elan skis from. Peter Glenn Ski and Sports have been getting people on the snow since 1958. They aren't one of the newer internet companies trying to take over the world with product lines and hotels. They do one thing: get you dialed in with the right gear for your adventure or vacation. They take pride in being the best at that. And whether you're experiencing the best-in-class retail experience or the 5-star rated website based on the almost 13,000 reviews they have, Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the products, and if you can't get the Peter Glenn experience in person, well, their website offers free shipping on orders over $49, a hassle-free return policy, and they'll price match. That's right. If you find something cheaper at a reputable dealer, contact Peter Glenn, let them know, and they'll match that price. If you like this podcast, please do that for me. To find out more about all things Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, a brand located right down the street from me here in Seattle, and the only brand I trust to keep my drinks hotter and colder than anyone else. Stanley is the best at this. I mean, they invented the category, and they are the all-inclusive brand that wants to outfit everyone's adventures. Stanley isn't going to sell you a $300 cooler. What they are going to do is offer you best-in-class product for a reasonable price. And these days, with ski resorts charging $30 for a burger, there's never been a better time to load up on Stanley's food storage supplies and save your family a lot of money by bringing your home-cooked goodness to the mountains, whether you like them piping hot or ice cold. Stanley delivers. And for listening to this podcast, Stanley's going to offer you the best deal they offer anyone, 30% off all Stanley products. To get the deal, head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code winteriscoming. That's all one word, all lowercase. Those are my sponsors this round. Now, let's get back into the podcast.
What I found pretty interesting was when your ski career started to really take shape at the Green Mountain Valley School, you always had the confidence that you were going to be great. Like, you ended up with your first sponsor, Spyder, when you were like 15, and you believed in yourself so much that you told them, I'm going to be on the U.S. ski team. I'm going to be really fast. I just want a suit. Is that how that all came together?
I know who you talked to. I've heard these quotes before. But yes, I mean, I developed a personal relationship, a family friend who worked at Spyder, who decided he was going to support me because he felt like he met somebody that was maybe extra special dedicated to the sport, right? So, yeah, I mean, I didn't take that for granted. Even when I was younger at Swain, I had people that were very committed to supporting me as a ski racer because, I don't know, I won't say why because that's for them to say, but I feel like they probably saw in me something extra that they wanted to get behind and support. So I think that became true further through my career with my association with Spyder, and I appreciated it. And I feel like I wanted to become somebody who showed my gratitude for that kind of support. And so that served me well throughout my entire career. Anytime I got a sponsor, a corporate sponsor that was actually going to pay me money and things like that, I always wanted to feel like they felt like they got something out of the relationship as well as I did, right? So yeah, I learned at an early age not to take for granted when you get supporters behind you, and to really appreciate them. And not only that, but also like learn from them. Hey, what can this person provide me beyond just their financial support or their moral support? Can I learn something from this person that's in my corner, right? So it's all part of developing who you are as an athlete that wants to take it to the next level. And at age 15, at my first sponsorship, I never really felt like I was a professional because I wasn't making money. But at that point, it starts to knock on the door of a profession, right? I have to take things seriously. I owe dedication to more than just myself and more than just my goals. I owe a debt of gratitude to the people who are supporting me. So it becomes something different than just a selfish pursuit at that time.
Well, it sounds like you're wise beyond your years if you're thinking that when you're 15 years old. But by your senior year, you start showing signs of greatness. And what does that look like on you? Are you cocky? Are you humble? How do you carry yourself?
I don't know that I knew then to be introspective about that question, but I think if I'm smart, if I was to ask my peers at that age, is AJ a cocky kid? They probably would have said, yeah. You know what I mean?
But I think it takes that to be great, right?
Yeah, I think you sort of have to be, right? You have to believe in yourself. You have to be, at some point, being a skier should develop self-confidence in a person because it's a dangerous sport. It's a sport that presents intimidation to those that pursue it, whether you're a beginning skier looking down this sheet of ice and you're not sure how you're going to get down, to somebody that is, standing at the top of a World Cup downhill feeling kind of the same way. Like, man, how am I going to race down this mountain with pure speed and do it without getting hurt, right? So ski racing develops a confident individual. And so if that confidence becomes cockiness, so be it, is kind of how I feel about it.
Okay, well, I asked because the greatest American downhiller before you, Bill Johnson, while a gold medalist, is looked at by a lot of people as almost an asshole. I hate to shit on someone who's not with us anymore. That's not really right of me. But when you first meet that guy, did you ever have a relationship with him?
My first personal encounter with Bill Johnson was probably much like most people's first encounter with Bill Johnson. I walked away feeling this guy's a cocky asshole. He demands respect without earning it. And I didn't really find my first encounter with Bill to be a very heartwarming one. On the other hand, as I was around Bill more, I began to learn things about what it takes to be a successful American ski racer. And Bill, in his own way, helped guide those of us that came behind him in the ways of being successful as an American ski racer. We are competing in somebody else's world. It's something that's very obvious to us as Americans that we're competing in somebody else's sport and somebody else's world, and we have to go out there and earn our respect. We have to earn our way around the circuit, and if we want to be successful, we probably are going to be up against tougher odds than most other athletes from other nations, right? And so Johnson was able to make it through that reality and be successful, and he made us well aware that we were going to have to fight that same battle, right? We were going to have to find our own way through because it really is an individual thing, If you would have asked Bill, hey, Bill, give me the secret to success, give me the secret to winning, he would have told you right up front, go figure it out for yourself, kid. I'm not going to give it to you on a silver platter. And I think the big reason for that is because everybody's got to figure it out for themselves. You have to figure out your own way based on your personality, based on your goals and, your own pathway. And so I think to that degree, Johnson did us a favor to force us to figure it out for ourselves rather than trying to hand it to us. So, for that, I'm thankful.
And if you think about figuring it out on your own, while I'm sure you always believed in yourself, was there a turning point where you felt yourself and the coaches and the other racers really started believing that you could be the next great one?
Sure. When I started to have some success on the World Cup, yeah, I think at that point I started to believe in myself. I started to develop confidence. I think, my teammates and my coaches started to open their eyes a little bit to the fact that it was happening for me, that I was authoring my own success at that point. And it wasn't like I was doing it on my own. I had lots of help, coaches, teammates. We're in an individual sport, so we're competing against one another. But we're also a team, and as teammates, we do support one another. We help one another. We push one another. So you always have to give a little credit where credit is due to your teammates, even though they're also your competitors. So yeah, I mean, sure, the corner was probably turned not in one instance, but over the course of many seasons for me. I had flashes of brilliance here and there and good runs or good races, good results here and there, but it wasn't like I was building any kind of consistency at any given time until, I don't know, I guess 91, fall of 91 when I won my first World Cup is when I probably would say that I was able to hit the confidence button and say, okay, I got this figured out. And now I can use that confidence as fuel for consistency. Before that, you can think that you're going to do it. You can feel like you've got the confidence to do it. But until you can back that up with results, I don't really feel like you've turned the corner.
Well, I mean, and just thinking about it, you make the U.S. ski team like the A team at 18 years old, which is an incredible feat. But it's not like you have a ton of great race results at that point. How do you even get on the A team?
Well, I don't know that I was on the A team at 18.
I mean, you went straight to the World Cup, right?
Yeah, right. I did go to the World Cup. When I made the national team at age 18, right?
Yeah.
I was named to the development team.
Okay.
Right. So I was like several tiers down from the A team. There were criteria then that, named athletes or placed athletes on the C team and the B team and the A team. And I definitely wasn't at that criteria for a couple of years. But I did go to the World Cup. Yeah, I mean, I kind of sort of stumbled my way into some fortunate circumstances for myself where, we had some athletes that got injured that were no longer present on the World Cup. So there were some open quota spots that were filled by myself, Tommy Moe, Kyle Rasmussen, guys that were showing some promise, that were showing the capability to go and jump into the World Cup with bibs 70, 80, late bib numbers and go give these kids some experience. So I think that those are the circumstances. How does an athlete in my shoes and Tommy and Kyle's shoes handle those opportunities? And for me, I took advantage of it. I popped a 12th in a World Cup race where, again, I had some fortunate circumstances with a great course that was reasonably flat and it played into my gliding style. And so, I took advantage of it and was able to bag a top 15 result. There was no consistency, though. I wasn't able to go out and repeat that feat again that year, but that one result is what put me into the Olympics. So I think it was preparation meeting opportunity, and I took advantage of it.
You do make the Olympics, like you said, and that's incredible, especially for your age. And was that like the only Olympics where there wasn't a tremendous amount of pressure on your shoulders? Like you could actually go there, enjoy the whole experience, and you didn't have everybody thinking that you were going to win?
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I allowed myself to go and compete in the Calgary Olympics in '88 without any pressure. I decided I was going to go and use it as some experience and experience the Olympics as a whole experience, participating in my events, but then also watching other events, hockey, and we went to ski jumping and experiencing the Olympic Village and all that kind of stuff. And so I took it in as a very well-rounded, holistic experience and not really allowing any pressure to be placed on my shoulders because I was young and I wasn't expecting to, or I didn't really have a goal set for myself at the beginning of that year to go race in the Olympics because it was kind of unrealistic. So yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to go in there and have that experience with no pressure. And then, at subsequent Olympics, I was going to take it a little bit differently. I was going to place higher expectations on myself for results and things like that. So yeah, '88 was unique.
So after that Olympics, over the next few years, it seems like you're figuring it out. Like you said, there's not much consistency. You have a handful of top 10 finishes that cement your place as the new face of American downhill. And then you head to Val d'Isère in December of 91. You mentioned this is your first win. I think the biggest moment of your career, at least at that point. And going into that one, do you do anything differently? Or is there any way to explain how you go from the middle of the pack to winning?
I think to understand that you sort of have to allow me to go back a year earlier, right? In the same race, the previous season, I won one of the training runs. I was third in one of the training runs. And I was coming into race day expecting to win. At that point, in my mind, I was ready to win my first World Cup race in December of 1990. And it didn't happen. I let the pressure get to me a little bit. I let outside expectations get to me. And I didn't perform as well as I knew I could. And I knew I could because I did it in training. And I know training's training and racing's different, but still, I was ready and I was able to perform at a level in training in that race that I did not achieve in the race. And that was a learning experience. And it took me a whole season to figure out how to get around that little hurdle, that little obstacle of performing well in training, but then not pulling it off in race. And then fast forward a year later, and I did almost the same thing. I won one of the training runs. I was top 3 in all 3 of the training runs. And I stood in the starting gate going, okay, here we are a year later. You know you can win this thing. You've proven that you've got the ability in training. Go do it. Don't go fuck this up like you did the year before. Go win this freaking race. And that for me was the big turning point because I did it. I was able to go out there and I won by a big margin. And it was just a moment of me like allowing my confidence to translate into performance rather than my confidence translating into unachieved expectations, which is the way it worked the year before. So yeah, I mean, that was the moment where I was able to take that confidence and show my ability. And at that point, when I was able to do that, I was like, okay, now that I've done it, I know that I can do it and I know how to do it. So now I'm going to go do it again next week and the week after and the week after. And that's when I was able to start to have consistency with my results.
So it's all mental at that point. It's like you have the ability, but you have to figure out how to channel everything into winning.
100%. I used to say ski racing's 50% physical and 100% mental. And people would respond to that, go, well, that's 150%. I'm like, yeah, dummy, figure out what I'm trying to say here.
Right.
Like, you got to be good, you got to be fit, but you can't do any of it without a strong mental game. So that's what that means is ski racing is 50% physical and 100% mental.
I mean, everybody's good at that level. So I would think the thing that separates it is the mental part. But you're young, you win this race, and I'm sure you like to have a good time, especially back then. What does a celebration look like after your first win?
I don't think I celebrated that much, to be honest with you. I mean, I had a Super G the next day.
Okay.
I think I remember getting back from all of the like finish line festivities and the podium stuff there and all the interviews and whatever else we had to do at that time. I think I probably had to pee in a cup, right, for drug testing. I got back to the hotel hours later, right, and completely exhausted from all the attention and all the interviews and all the talking and all that kind of stuff. And I walked in and there was the rest of the team at lunch and they're like, oh, AJ, all right, good job. It was like a pat on the back, but it wasn't like everybody stood up and threw me on their shoulders, right? It was like I was still the guy that they roomed with, the guy that they traveled with, the guy that they fought with on the basketball court, and all that other stuff, just a familiar character in the group of our downhill team. And so nobody elevated me onto any sort of high podium or anything like that. It was just another afternoon for them. And for me, it was an afternoon that was, I guess, just an affirmation of all the hard work. I hope for those guys, and I think it's true, that it was an affirmation for them as well, because, in training, we're peers. In training, we're pretty equal. In training, we were competing head to head with each other. And when one of us went out and was able to have a good result, I think it gave all the other guys confidence that they could do it too, because I wasn't head and shoulders above anybody else in training and in everything else that we were doing. We were peers, and so, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a celebration story, there really wasn't one that day. And, I think when we had our opportunities to celebrate, we did it as a team, as a group, because we all were there together, sort of arm in arm, training together, racing together, lifting, sprinting, physio, all the stuff was sort of a team effort. And so when we went out and celebrated and let loose a little bit, it was sort of as a group and as a team. I don't think anybody really felt like we were out here celebrating my stuff tonight or that guy's stuff tonight. But I will tell you, we did have our moments. We unwound and we had a lot of fun, and we learned our way around the nightclubs in some of these towns. So we took advantage of it, for sure.
Nice. Well, a little over a month later, you're racing the Hahnenkamm in Kitzbuel. Can you describe why that's the most important and challenging downhill of them all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it has a little to do with the difficulty and the complexity of the course itself. It has a little to do with the history and the legendary lore of the Strife and of Kitzbuel. It has a little to do with those that have come before us and have had success and failure before us. And so there's sort of a collage of things that make Kitzbuel the best race to win, the best race to compete in. I think a big piece of it is that it is the most challenging, technically, but also it's the legendary history of how that course started, where it came from, and the fact that it's got some of the most unique features within the course itself. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at those that have won it and those that have come close but still haven't won it, I have to say that those are the things that get your attention and make you very aware of why Kitzbuel is so important in the grand picture of ski racing as a whole.
And that day you take second. Does that second place finish earn you more respect from the Euros compared to winning in Val d'Isère?
You bet it does. and that fact was not lost on me at all, and nor was it lost on anybody else. I mean, I won't sit here and tell you that getting second in Kitzbuel was more important than winning Val d'Isère, because I can't really say that with a straight face. And I won't really quantify the two in comparison like that, because they were important for different reasons. Val d'Isère, the old course at Val d'Isère too, right, was by no means as challenging or as difficult or as rewarding of a course to ski as Kitzbuel was, right? But winning a race is still winning a race. Like, those same guys that you race against in Kitzbuel were racing that day in Val d'Isère. And when I won that race in Val d'Isère, I was the best in the world that day. When I got second in Kitzbuel, I was the second best in the world that day. So that's one way of looking at that. But on the other hand, Kitzbuel is a more death-defying course to race. It's a gnarlier course. It's a more dangerous course. There's more spectacular crashes on record in Kitzbuel than there are in Val d'Isère. So that lends quite a bit of cachet to how you perform at Kitzbuel. So, yeah, I mean, I would agree for sure that the Euros looked at my second place in Kitzbuel as a greater achievement than my first place in Val d'Isère.
It's time for my second round of sponsors. And even before Outdoor Research started sponsoring this podcast, I was rocking a lot of their gear, because nothing else I've used before holds up in the brutal weather that the Pacific Northwest delivers. Everywhere you go in the PNW, you're going to see a ton of OR gear. And that's because the locals know that while other brands may spend a lot more marketing dollars, OR keeps you drier and warmer every time. And that's what it's all about. Well, it's also about looking good. And while OR used to be all about technical mountaineering gear, and they still do that, they've changed a bit. They've hired new designers and partnered with some of the most incredible athletes in ski and snowboard, like backcountry legend Mark Abra, world champion freeskier Troy Podmilsack, X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin, and snowboarder Neil Provo, who are making sure the new fits look as good as they perform in the elements. You can check out all things OR over at outdoorresearch.com, and when you check out, enter the code TPM25. That's all caps and the number 25 with no spaces, and I'm going to save you 25% off your order. Sale items and pro products are excluded. My final sponsor, and one that's a daily driver for me, is Best Day Brewing. They are hands down the best flavors in non-alcoholic beer. That's right, life isn't all about drinking too much. It's all about having your best days ever, and to do that, you need something that won't slow you down. That's where Best Day comes into play. It has all the flavor of your alcoholic beer, but none of the alcohol. Meaning you can have a few, and then you can drive yourself, your kids. I mean, you can drive anyone anywhere because you're going to be clear-headed and ready to go. I'm not telling everyone to quit drinking alcohol altogether. I mean, sure, a few beers can be fun, but now, when I drink alcoholic beer, I mix a few Best Days in to make sure that I'm not that guy. You know what I'm talking about. And if you're cutting out alcohol completely, congrats. Finding Best Day will make that easier than ever. And coming in at less than 75 calories, you won't be packing on the pounds like your regular IPAs do. Best Day is brewed for the doers of winter. The skiers, the snowboarders, the snowmobilers, the sled doggers, the ski bladers, the splitboarders, the racers, the snowshoers, and everyone in between. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day. And if you can't find it at the store, you can always go to bestdaybrewing.com or find it on Amazon. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. So the Olympics are a month away. I think your confidence is at an all-time high, and you should be racing the course that you recently won on. But right. Why did they change the course leading up to that Olympics?
So I think that the story there is that the FIS and the World Cup was really trying hard to evolve the sport into something that was more difficult, more challenging, and certainly more technical. So at this point in the evolution of ski racing, there was an effort to make downhill more technical. Was it because the speeds were higher and we were getting from start to finish in a quicker rate and they wanted to maybe keep us under control a little bit more? Sure, I think that was part of it. I think the other part of it was that the equipment was evolving into more capable equipment, right? Equipment that was more capable of carving versus just these stiff, long boards that we were skiing on in the 80s, like I mentioned earlier. And so when the equipment gets more capable, the courses have got to get a little bit more turny, right? To keep us going from A to Z a little bit under more control. So that course in Val d'Isère for the Olympics was sort of that first experiment of, okay, let's make this a little bit more technical. Let's make it a little bit more turny. And by the way, let's make it a little more spectacular, right? So they carved that wonky channel through the rocks, which was speed-wise slower than the GS turn, which, in terms of ski racing, downhill should be faster than GS.
Yeah.
And at that point in the course, it really wasn't. And frankly, there were a couple of points in that course where they had to slow us down to speeds that were like 30 miles an hour, which, for a downhill, you want to kick out of the start and you want to get up to race speed and you want to maintain race speed all the way down the hill, right? And so race speed for us is like probably try to be no slower than 60 and try to be as fast as you can up to 80, 90 miles an hour and then fluctuate in that range. But when that range fluctuates down below 50 miles an hour and even to 30 miles an hour, it's like, oh my gosh, it really feels like city driving versus highway driving, right? City driving where you're going from stop sign to stop sign.
Yep.
Versus highway driving where you're weaving in and out of traffic at 80 or 90 miles an hour. That's the feeling of being a downhiller.
You can't pin it.
Yeah, exactly. At that course, you couldn't pin it. They were like slowing us down and the rhythm change. It was just out of character for downhill. And so it really wasn't an enjoyable course. I remember speaking with Patrick Ortlieb, who won that race, and he didn't like it either. He was a pure downhiller. He won it, but he didn't like it. He didn't love the course. Like Aspen's got a flow to it, right? And Kitzbuel's got a flow to it, and Wengen's got a flow, and all the classic World Cup courses have got these flows that when you find that flow, there's an enjoyment to running that course. And there was no enjoyment to running that course at the 92 Olympics in Val d'Isère. It just really wasn't. And frankly, that's part of the reason why it didn't become a main stop on the tour. It just wasn't a good course.
So that Olympics doesn't go exactly how you want it, but they change the course on you. There's also a ton of extra pressure on you as well. I don't know if that plays into it. But either way, you rebound nicely. Like a month later, you're on the podium in BC with a third in Panorama. But the next phase of your career seems to be about you getting screwed. And while you finished your career with one World Cup victory, you should have 3 more. And it all starts with another race in Val d'Isère in 92. You have a lead in the race after 22 skiers have finished their runs. Then a storm moves in and cancels the race. Storms happen. Is that one easy to accept or are you pissed off?
That one was, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was easy to accept, but there was a little bit of understanding and logic behind it. One thing that let's make sure we don't lose sight of is, because this will come into the story later on, back in those days, the top skiers raced with bib 1 through 15, right? The first seed was 1 through 15. In today's racing, the top skiers are scattered throughout the top 30. So when they stop a race in the mid-20s, back in those days, the top guys raced. Okay, so the top guys got a chance to race. The later guys didn't. Okay, should this be deemed a complete race, even though not everybody got to race, or should it not? Okay, so in that race, I think in the mid-20s, probably less than 50% of the field got to race. What was the rule back in those days? We don't really know. Like, I don't think there was a rule that was actually written in the rule books of X amount of skiers have to kick out of the start for it to be a complete race. What we all assumed was that the rule was that at least 50% of the field had to start. That was what we all kind of were talking about of the rule. A couple years prior to that, there was another race that I had raced in that got cut off without everybody getting to race, and it was considered a complete race. I think Michael Meyer from Italy won that one, and I can't remember exactly where that one was, but I do remember there being an instance prior to my first experience where the race was stopped short and it was considered a complete race, but probably more than half the field raced. So back to your question, yeah, weather came in, it basically shut down the race because it became impossible to see. Lots of snow fell on the track, it got soft. It was the right decision to stop that race. So does AJ get to be deemed the winner of the race? Well, according to the FIS, no. The FIS said, no, it wasn't a full race. We're not going to award the FIS points. For me, fortunately and thankfully, they awarded me the trophy. They awarded me the prize money. So, I've got that stuff in my pocket, at least from the perspective of somebody at least recognized it as a race. The FIS didn't, and they didn't award me the points. So, it is what it is.
Well, that one sucks. It gets even worse in 93. You have a commanding lead in Aspen, and when I say commanding, you're winning by like 0.83 seconds, which is an eternity in ski racing. And with this one, a rut develops near a gate, and I would think this kind of thing happens in ski racing, especially towards the end of a race. When that happens, is it pretty much part of the game?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, ski racing is an outdoor sport. It's a sport of, advantage to the earlier bibs and disadvantage to the later bibs for this very reason, right? We get ruts, we get holes, we get deteriorating course conditions. And that's something that as a ski racer, you just deal with. And that's why we try to get our points lowered so we get a better start number, so we don't have to deal with bad conditions, right? So that's just a fact of the sport. In that particular race, March, Colorado, springtime, warmer weather, warmer temperatures. And where this particular rut was, it was right before a jump, it was at the end of the road after airplane turn. And because the jump was flying a long way, they moved one of the gates to make it a little bit turnier to slow us down before the jump. And I went to the course setter, the FIS director at the time, and I said, hey, as an idea, maybe you should move the turn up the hill a little further, maybe grab 2 or 3 gates earlier and make that a little turnier to slow us down up there rather than right here where everyone's going to come in with a lot of speed and they're going to hammer the edges to make this little turn. And we're going to develop a rut right here. And I mentioned this 3 days before the race, and I was just sort of as a sort of suggestion, from an experience. And I said, hey, it's going to be warm. It's going to be soft. If we have to make this turn here, there's going to be a rut, just sort of, hey, FYI. The response I got was, mind your own business. You race, we'll set the course and stay out of our business. I was like, all right, fine, whatever. So, 3 days later, race day, warm weather, this rut develops. We hear a radio report at the start. Hey, there's a rut developing. Make sure you're aware of it, which is a pretty common course report for a course that's experiencing a little bit of deterioration, right? The coaches give you a little heads up. You can adjust your line a little bit. You can loosen your legs a little bit, be a little bit prepared mentally for a little jarring rut at a certain turn. So it's not out of the ordinary for this kind of a circumstance to take place. And so I come down, I'm anticipating the rut, I absorb it, continue on down the course, continue to race, get to the finish, have my result. Some of the other racers didn't have quite the pleasant experience through the same rut that I did. And so the Austrian coaches were like, hey, we got to stop the race. There's a big hole. We got to fix it. So they stopped the race. And, this particular FIS official that I had the conversation with a few days prior came down. And I think as a way to stick it to me a little bit more for being the cocky American that was going to tell him how to do his job. So he takes his ski off and drives the tail of his ski into this rut, as he says, to probe and see how far down the soft snow is. And instead of just lifting his ski straight up, he just pries the ski backwards, more or less like you would with a shovel, digs the hole even worse. At which point now the course is completely unskiable and they cancel the race.
It's like sabotage.
Sure, call it sabotage if you want. So that's what a lot of people that were there witnessing it happen, that's the way they described it to me.
If someone from another country was winning that race at that point, would the race have still been canceled, or is it happen because you're an American and you're in the lead?
Well, I'm an American on American snow in an American race, and you'd think that kind of thing wouldn't happen when you're supposed to have home field advantage, right? But I don't know. I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories about it, but, me and this FIS official had our head-butting moments for many years leading up to this, and I'm pretty confident it was his way to tell me to go mind my own business, to put it kindly.
Okay. Another Olympics come and go. We're not going to talk about that. After that, it's like 2 solid years where you're not really cracking the top 10 on the World Cup. Is that why you end up doing some NORAMs and FIS races to kind of get your mojo back?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a pretty normal thing. It's a little bit like baseball, right? A player's not really at top of his form. They take a little bit of pressure off, put him, back down in the minor leagues for a couple of games, couple of weeks, whatever it is, let him figure it out. And so not that I think in any way was demoted, but, we go and use Europa Cups and NORAMs as, races to experiment with things and try to figure a few things out, and take a little bit of pressure off and take opportunities at other races to go and try to sort some things out. Test some technique, test some different equipment, things like that. So, yeah, we're searching for speed at that point.
Does gear play into that as well? Because, you're the North American race poster boy for Rossi, and you're doing well. and you're coming off like race stock, vast plated 3G and 4G era, and then you kind of go into the dual tech construction. Was there a big adjustment needed, especially when you're downsizing from like a 225 to a 210? And did they make you use the dual tech shit?
Yeah. So, I mean, in December 95, I had a crash and tore my ACL. I was out for the season. And that season, that 95-96 season, was when they introduced the dual tech downhill skis. Dual tech had been more or less a successful design for the slalom and GS skis for a couple of years. And then they sort of adapted that design into the downhill skis. And so when I came back in the 96-97 season, after missing a whole year, the dual tech downhill ski was the downhill ski. Like everybody was using it. Everybody had a year of, figuring it out, testing it out, experimenting with it, and learning how it worked a little bit differently. And so when I came back, I wasn't up to speed at all with how the ski worked. And so I told Rossignol, I said, listen, I'm going to ski on my old stuff. I'm going to ski on the stuff I know that works for me. I'm going to be coming back trying to get my fitness back and get my, just figure out how to go fast again after, being out. I got a new knee here. Let's not do a new knee and a new set of skis at the same time. What do you say? Right. And they said, okay, we'll let you ski on your old stuff. So I came back and skied on my old stuff and, got my legs back under me, so to speak, and spent a year on the old stuff and was really enjoying it. And then the next off season, they said, okay, old stuff's gone. We're taking it away. You got to ski on the dual techs. And I just couldn't make them work. I spent an entire off season battling the dual techs. I spent a race season battling the dual techs. Could not figure out how they worked. And frankly, I don't think anybody really liked it. And if you kind of dig into the underbelly of results and the data, Rossignol was a dominant ski brand in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And other than Tomba, in that era of dual tech and post dual tech, Rossignol wasn't as dominant at all, especially in speed. They lost a lot of their top racers, as top downhillers, to other brands, Atomic, and other brands that were coming up in their development. And, I think Rossignol really lost a lot of their dominance on the tour because of the dual tech. And, frankly, if you look at it, they don't use the dual tech anymore, do they? Right? They went back to the old laminate design, as did most people, frankly. I mean, Atomic was very successful with their capped design ski. Solomon was pretty successful with their capped design ski, but nobody's using a capped design ski anymore. So everyone's back to this laminate. So there was an era of experimentation with that new construction design, and it was an experiment that didn't work, and they're back to the traditional layups.
Well, it sounded like you had really, really fast skis at all times, even with dual tech, given that they weren't your favorite skis, but because you had a legendary ski tech in Ed Waldeberger, and it sounded like the way he did things was different than everybody else. Is there a way to describe his method to his madness?
I wish I could, and here's why. Like the secret code, right? The code of ski techs is you don't talk about your secrets. You don't tell people what you're waxing. You don't tell people your secret tuning techniques and things like that. I mean, these guys share ski rooms, and so they're probably spying on each other a little bit to some degree. But I mean, a good serviceman that's having success is, hiding his technique, right? He's not really giving away his secrets to the other techs for obvious reasons. And the same is true with the athletes. Like, I didn't really know exactly what he was waxing on my skis, and I didn't really know exactly what bevels he was using and where he was sharpening and tapering the sharpness of my edges and things like that. I mean, the magic of ski tuning is just that. It's magic, and it's something that a good ski tech doesn't share. And when that relationship between a ski serviceman and the athlete, when that relationship clicks and that chemistry is there, there's a really great synergy of the way he's tuning my skis is adapted within my skiing and vice versa. And yeah, I mean, we had a relationship where we didn't say a lot to each other. A little bit of that was because of a language barrier. But, we also didn't need to say a lot to each other. Like, he knew what I needed. I knew what kind of information he needed back from me. And he was able to sort of custom tune my skis for the type of snow that we were racing on, the type of course that we were racing on. And then he would put my skis on the ground at the start, and I'd step into them and I would go. I had no input onto what skis I was skiing on for the most part, right? We did ski testing. I would tell him what I liked and what I didn't like. But he was picking the ski on race day, and he was picking the tune and picking the wax on race day, and I was just piloting it. And so, yeah, Eddie was one of the greatest ski techs of his time. And, I definitely benefited a lot from his presence in my camp.
And so while you're with Rossignol, I would think that maybe one of the most important sponsors that you had and one of the most prestigious is Rolex. How do you land a brand like that?
Yeah, Rolex was an awesome partnership. And, I went with IMG as my business management company. I met a guy named John Franklin who became my business agent. And I went with them specifically because I wanted to branch out beyond the sport. I wanted my brand to transcend just the sport of ski racing. So I sought out IMG and John, and we had a great partnership for a really long time. John had a relationship at Rolex from prior relationships with other events that he was involved in. And so, we more or less picked up the telephone, called up Rolex and said, hey, can we come in and pitch you guys? And they said, absolutely, come on in. So we went into the headquarters in New York one off season and, met their president, met their CEO, had a really nice meeting. And I walked out of there with a watch on my wrist. And that was the beginning of a great relationship. We used for representation at the junior Olympic level for a really long time. And we did some print advertising. We did some radio advertising. I did a lot of outings with Rolex. It was a great partnership, a great relationship. And frankly, I don't wear anything but Rolex on my wrist today. And it's always been that way.
Well, that's pretty nice to be able to say, I don't wear anything but Rolex on my wrist. I wear nothing on my wrist. If I were to wear something, maybe it'd be like an Apple smartwatch, but I don't do that. But how many Rolexes do you have?
I don't know exactly. I have probably five Rolexes. There's ones I've had that I've given away. I gave John, my agent, a Rolex, a really expensive Rolex, a Daytona once, just as a thank you for being a great rep and a great friend. I've given my parents Rolexes. I've given, family members Rolexes. So I've been given and purchased several that I don't have anymore, but I have five of my own, one that I wear every day and a few others that I keep in a safe because they mean something beyond just a timepiece for me. So they have sentimental value and I'll pass them on to my kids someday.
Awesome, man. So there was Champion too. I think they were a huge brand. I know they were a huge brand back then. But when you think about all your sponsors, can you list who the brands were? And can you make, in the height of your ski career, like $500,000 ski racing or even more?
Yeah, I mean, I would think today, the top ski racers of today are probably making a lot more than that. They're
For
probably
sure.
making well into the millions. In my day, I was probably making $500,000 a year, and that was good for a guy like me, good for a guy with one win on his resume. The top racers of my day, Alberto Tomba and Herman Meyer, as an example, I'm sure they were making well into the several millions of dollars. But for me, I felt like I was doing very well. I was happy to be as successful as I was. The sponsors that I had, the partners that I had were ones that I was proud to have. I wasn't just going to be a billboard for any old sponsor. We took strong consideration into what partnerships we agreed to have. I had Ray-Ban on my helmet for a while, and they were a great eyewear company. They were from my hometown of Rochester. I was really proud to be partners with them. I had McDonald's for a short period of time. I was really proud to have Champion as a sportswear company as a partner, and, of course, Rolex. And, all my industry supporters and suppliers and sponsors were always ones that I was really grateful to have as partners. And I treated those like relationships. They were more than just business relationships to me. They were personal relationships. So that's part of the career, right? It's part of being a professional athlete, having those partnerships.
And it sounds like you figured that out at 15 with Spyder and you just kept going with that. But back to your racing, you get things back on track in Whistler in February of 95. You start in the back of the pack at 54th and you should have no chance, but you end up taking second in the Super G. And while we could talk more about this, our time is kind of winding down. So I have to ask, how did you almost snap your neck in the finish area?
Yeah, that Super G in Whistler was, Super G was a mystery for me. It was a puzzle that I had a very difficult time figuring out. As a downhiller and a speed event guy, you'd think it'd be natural for me to have success in Super G. And my success in Super G was here and there, and a lot of it was missing. I had a lot of slow results, I should say, and only a few top tens. But yeah, that day in Whistler, they set a course that was pretty open. It was on the downhill track. And I was feeling like, I can probably run this on downhill skis today. And Eddie at the time was like, I don't know if downhill skis are right. It's pretty turny. Are you sure it's going to make the turns more difficult? And I said, yeah, I think this is pretty open on the bottom. I said, the top is pretty turny, but I think I can manage my way around these top turns just to get to those lower ones that are set pretty open. And I think the downhill skis are going to do us a favor. And so I ran the race on downhill skis, and I was real slow on the top. But as soon as the course opened up, those skis really worked to my advantage. And I did. I had to navigate those longer skis around the turns, and I was forced to bring my best skiing of all time that day because I was really cranking those big, long skis around some tight turns. But yeah, on the bottom, I was bringing back time on the leaders pretty quickly. I think my speed trap was in the 80s, which is a big speed in Super G.
Yeah.
That's pretty unusual to go that fast in Super G. But yeah, if that course was maybe another 100 feet longer, I might have won it. I was going fast and taking back time every step of the way at the bottom. So yeah, I crossed the finish line with bib 54 and looked at the board. Had to look twice. I wasn't sure second was right. And when it was, I just let out a big whoop and a little head snap. And I wouldn't say I was going to break my neck, but that's a funny story. That was a great race. I enjoyed that one.
Then your huge career moment happens. You're in Aspen. You have another commanding lead. You're 0.58 seconds ahead of everybody after 31 skiers have raced. Another storm moves in, and while the race is canceled, all of the FIS jury on site rule this race to be official. And I would think when you win your first downhill in 4 years and you do it on American soil, it has to be like the best feeling of your life. Can you describe that?
Yeah, well, you're right about that. I mean, that was a great one. That was a redemption race for me because it had been so long since I had my knee injury, struggled with my equipment and all that stuff. And coming back and being able to win in front of family and friends was really, really rewarding for me. And Aspen is a really special place for me. It's a special place for ski racing. It's got a really special history in the sport of ski racing. Those facts aren't lost on me. I really appreciated being able to have success and stand on the podium in Aspen and sort of deliver to the locals, the Aspenites, the fans of ski racing, and some of the pioneers of the sport, deliver to them a win for America. And to me, that was a big part of what that day meant to me. And yeah, it was great. It was a really proud moment for me to win at home. And you're right, like that was one of those ones where they stopped the race short. The local FIS jury deemed it a legit, valid, and complete race. And then we get into, a week later, a few nations protested the race and decided that it should not be an official race. And so this kind of gets back to what I said earlier about whether or not the top guys start in the front of the pack or that in this instance were some of the best racers not given the opportunity to race. And the World Cup committee had to rule on this protest. And the World Cup committee was not just made up of Alpine representatives. It was made up also of representatives from Nordic combined, and jumping, in which sports the best racers go at the end. And so their assumption was that the best racers hadn't had a chance to compete that day. So this shouldn't be an official race. And this is back in the era of pre-internet, pre-cell phone, pre-Zoom video calls. They were doing this entire conference by fax machine. And so the whole sort of discussion wasn't really capable of taking place for everybody to get all the facts and everybody to understand the context of everything in the race. And so the race was reversed. The official results were reversed. And about a week later, it was ruled that race was not going to be official.
I read somewhere that you had thought about retirement because you were so disheartened by that whole thing. Was there any serious consideration to that, or were you just pissed off?
No, at the time, I mean, in the context, it was very serious. I felt like, this is the third time in my career now that I'd had a race that I won, canceled, more or less, right? And in my point of view, it was a victory taken away. And I felt like, as an athlete who is willing to train and dedicate their life and lay their life on the line by kicking out of the start and racing down the mountain and laying it all on the line, for athletes that are willing to do that and then to have the entire thing erased was not something that I felt like I really wanted to continue to be part of. I mean, I felt like I gave my all, and my all was not seen as something that was worth it. And that's kind of the way it felt to me, at that moment. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely was, for several days, I was very strongly taking a second look at, was this worth it? Why was I committing everything I had to this sport when this sport wasn't committing everything it had to me? And that's the way I looked at it. Obviously I continued to race, and I had some really great races throughout the rest of that year. I mean, I went to Whistler, and Tommy and Kyle and I put 3 Americans in the top 10 for the first time in history at the Whistler World Cup. And we went to Norway, and Kyle won there. which I thought was a great redemption. He won the race. It was actually the makeup race for the Aspen cancellation.
Okay.
And so I felt like that was a great redemption for us. And then we went to the World Cup finals, and I got second in Bormio at the end of that season. So I felt like it ended really strong, and I was pretty satisfied at the end of the year.
And then when you think about the rest of your career, I think there was a bunch of back injuries, but you're still able to make the 98 Olympic Games, which is crazy that you go to 4 Olympic Games, but you end up calling it a career, I think, at the end of that year. And for time, I'm going to have to skip over a little bit, but that's okay because we're kind of getting towards the end of the podcast anyway. But what does retirement look like for you? Is there a big ceremony? And does it take a while to get used to being a regular civilian?
Yeah, so no big ceremony. I mean, I got a mention on Sports Center. Tommy and Kyle and I all hung it up at the same time. So the three of us got a nice little mention on Sports Center, which was kind of cool, to be included in mainstream sports America. But no, I mean, there was no big ceremony. We all decided we were going to go from the World Cup to the Pro Downhill Tour. And so we jumped into that circuit the next year and continued to dabble in it a little bit. For me, the luster had worn off. I'd lost the enthusiasm and the commitment to what it took to be a great ski racer. So after a couple of those pro races, I pulled out of it and really called it a career. And yeah, I mean, the transition into civilian life, so to speak, was not easy. As a downhiller, as a World Cup downhiller, Olympic ski racer, that is what defined me. It's what defines any athlete. If you're at a cocktail party, somebody says to you, "What do you do?" It's easy. I'm an Olympic downhiller.
Yeah.
That's an easy answer, right? It's an answer you can be proud of. I didn't have that answer anymore. I didn't have that short sort of elevator speech about what I do, who I am. And it took a long time to really rebuild that. It took a long time to accept the fact that my glory days, so to speak, were behind me. And so, you move into civilian life and figure out what the next chapter is. So that was a tough transition.
But I will say you're not just a regular civilian, because in 2004, you make the Ski Hall of Fame, which we could talk about more, but we're not going to. We're going to talk about inappropriate questions. And I have another Hall of Famer and badass American downhiller to ask these inappropriate questions. You asked Chad Fleischer his inappropriate questions, and I let him repay the favor for you to ask you questions. Are you ready for question number 1 from Chad?
I am.
Hey, Jay, if you were stuck on an island and had to pick Bill Egan or Uli Luti, who are your former coaches on the World Cup team, which would you choose to be your castaway mate and why?
There's no easy answer to that one. I love both of those guys to death. They both were incredible influences in my career. But I guess if we're talking about being stuck on a deserted island, both of those guys make me laugh equally. So the entertainment factor, I couldn't go wrong with choosing either one of them. Which one of those guys probably has more meat on the bone? Because I know I'd have to probably kill one of them to survive and eat their meat. I don't know. I'd probably have to go with Uli. Uli would be probably the more tender meat for helping me survive, being the last survivor on the deserted island.
All right, so he would be a cannibal and he would eat Uli. Let's go with question number 2.
AJ, who was the one person you refused to room with on the road and why?
Well, I had a particular roommate that was my favorite roommate to room with, and that was Bill Hudson. And I would have to say that the one single guy that I wanted to avoid rooming with was Jeff Olson. And, Jeff and I are old teammates. We're longtime friends, but Jeff and I just did not have good chemistry in the room. So, Jeff Olson is the one guy that I refuse to room with.
All right, and your final inappropriate question.
Hey, is it true you used to smash things against the wall like your laptop computer and break things when you lost in games like backgammon and cards with your teammates? People often talk about your short temper. Is this true?
Well, Chad knows it's true. He's been there. He's seen it. He's seen the temper before. I was a tough loser. I did not like to lose, whether it was ski racing or Nintendo. And, I had a short temper and a hot streak as a young man. So, Chad, you're right. I broke a few video games in my day.
All right, well, that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And looking at your career, when U.S. skiing was looked at as the Bill Johnson show, it was refreshing to have you come around, an all-American nice kid, to become the face of American downhill. And I don't think any ski racer has been more screwed by FIS than you. I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been to have 75% of your wins taken away from you. It's not fair, but life isn't fair. But you know what? You're a U.S. ski team legend who had an absolutely incredible Hall of Fame career, and in a sport dominated by Euros, You kept America relevant and helped usher in the new generation. So thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure to be on the show.
So that was time with AJ Kitt, and what a great attitude he has about everything. I mean, I guess he can't change the past, but for a guy to be screwed over as much as AJ was, it's amazing how he's remained as professional, calm, cool, and collected as he has. He's a dude who had so much taken away, more than anyone in ski racing, and it's like he's unwilling to throw anyone under the bus. Which means AJ Kitt really is a stand-up guy, and he was the much-needed face of the U.S. ski team at a time when they needed something other than an ugly American representing us on the world stage. That's the podcast. At this point, I want you to review me wherever you listen. If I read your review on the podcast, you're going to win a prize, and that prize will quench your thirst. You can guess what it is, but if you can't guess, I'll let you know. It's NA beer from Best Day Brewing. It should also be known that I'm only able to ship this NA beer to people in the US of A. While I know that sounds like I'm an asshole, I love you and your countries better than the US for the most part these days, it seems like. But I can't ship to you because I don't have the money and I don't even know if it's legal. But starting now, I will read your international reviews on the podcast. Just please make them entertaining or make them something that you'll know I like this week's review from Snowtungen in Denmark. It's a 5-star review titled Awesome Show. Best snow action sports podcast by far. Mike focuses on his guests and preparation leading to are second to none, no matter the hour. I hope that one day I get to ask him inappropriate questions. Smiley face. Well, thank you for that review, Snowtungen. While I'm not going to send you anything, feel free to email me a couple inappropriate questions for me, and I'll work them into the show. For anybody else that wants to submit a review, if you have an iPhone, here's how you do it. First, hit the podcast icon on your iPhone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. And even if you already subscribe, you still need to search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, star rate me and review the podcast. Thank you for taking the 30 seconds to do that for me, and thank you for listening. And finally, please support the brands that make this show happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.